Yes, you got that right. Neon Genesis Evangelion 64. This was a Japanese exclusive title in 1999. It was developed by BEC, a company that had a super cool looking logo, which was Bandai's video game developer studio through the mid-90s. Of course, this N64 game was based on the Gainax show of the same name, and also the film. Interestingly, while seeking to replicate scenes from the source media, this game also features a few branching paths, with alternative outcomes to your chosen plot points. Mostly the gameplay comes across as being a slower-paced fighter, where you take control of the game's central characters and their EVAs. Shinji pilots Unit 1, Asuka is in the Red Unit 2,
which I actually just built a model of. This thing's friggin' sweet.
And Rei is in Unit 0. Besides the main fighting game portion, there are a few other sections of gameplay, a brief shooting gallery type levels, and even a sort of primitive Guitar Hero type thing where you push the C buttons while songs play. Unfortunately, this game is generally disliked. The slower, action-oriented combat approach mixed with the interactive anime sections, combined with a very low quality audio and a sort of story censorship, led to very mixed responses. And of course, it was only released in Japan. And that's the first category of this list, Japanese exclusives. Now, the Nintendo 64 was not known to me to have anything at all that dipped into the mecha market, but after putting in the time and effort to try and build out a concrete list of every game with even a hint of giant robots, I came to find a solid few of them, though most were region exclusive. From there, we'll look at games that released in non-exclusive markets, and then we'll have a big old sit-down with probably the largest category, honorable mentions. Turns out quite a few games have a more singular mech element that's fun to take a look at, while the vast majority of games on this 1996 Nintendo home console are not mecha-focused. And who am I, you might be wondering? Hi, I'm Empty. I'm a bit of a latecomer to the whole universe of mecha, but since involving myself in it, I've come to really love it. I've been using this YouTube channel to not only capture my thoughts on specific games, but also do things like showcase and curate, in a more general sense, for the genre as a whole. If you'd like to keep up with my videos, go ahead and hit the sub button or hop into the comments to let us know what your favorite Nintendo 64-bit robot was. Thanks. Continuing on with this fighting type of gameplay, the island of Japan saw a subsidiary of Bandai release a spin-off in 1998, and that would be Banpresto with Super Robot Spirits, one of the many games associated with the series Super Robot Wars. We'll get back to that in just a second, but first, Super Robot Spirits was a 2.5D fighter, basically a 2D plane fighter with graphics in 3D. I guess this one sold pretty poorly and was generally disliked because it lacked things like extensive movesets and interesting environments. What it didn't lack, though, was a cast of characters ripped straight from anime mech shows. Volts, Shiny Gundam, Dunbean, Zabungle, Dankuga, Super Beast, Machine God, and that's really what Super Robot series is known for. So the Super Robot series is usually called Super Robot Wars or Super Robot Taisen and is mainly a tactical role-playing game. Fun fact, these games are still being put out today even. Y is the newest from 2025, but besides that there's something like, 100 other games in various iterations for various consoles. The main thing though is that they are all one big, great mishmash of characters pulled straight out of robot animes. I've heard this series described as like being a kid and dumping out your toy bucket of random characters and then playing chess with them and bashing them all together. This one's main plot apparently circles around the Oz faction from Gundam Wing battling the aliens of Dankuga, with appearances from not only original characters, but those from things like Aura Battler Dunbean, Leisner, Getter Robo, Giant Robo, Invincible Steelman, Mazinger Z, Mobile Suit Gundam, God Mars, and even Combattler. And if that isn't enough for you, this 1999 Banpresto title also had some neat connectivity for owners of Super Robot Wars Link Battler on the Game Boy Color. 1999 was a big year for mecha games in Japan because here's another one, the Arena Fighter Last Legion UX. Now, LL was developed by the Japanese studio UX, who are most well known for making like American WWE wrestling games of all things, and this game was published by Hudson Soft. There were some interviews on this one that explained initially they wanted to make this one up to 4 versus 4 battles, but had to cut that way down due to the technical limitations of the Nintendo 64. Despite Last Legion UX being considered a fighting game here, it does resemble more standard mech game sensibilities. The arena is fully 3D, you lock on to your 1v1 opponent and shoot missiles or get close for melee weapons. There's a story mode that works similarly to any other fighting game. You know, you beat every single character in the roster until it slowly starts getting more difficult. Interestingly, the roster here even included some characters inspired by Bomberman. The year 1999 strikes again with the release of Bangai-O by Treasure. In the 2000s, this one did see a Dreamcast port that did make it to the West, but unfortunately this initial N64 version is left to fan translation. This one follows a brother-sister pair who pilot a mech in order to stop an illegal fruit smuggling ring. The gameplay is multi-directional shmup, with over 100 missiles on screen at a time in 44 different levels. Before I close out on this one, it's probably worth mentioning it did continue on to a Nintendo DS title named Bangai-O Spirits in 2008 and a Bangai-O HD Missile Fury for Xbox 360's Xbox Live Arcade. There are a lot of custom Robo fans stateside due to the GameCube title, who often don't even realize this originally started as a Japanese-only Nintendo 64 series. There were 2 of these, Custom Robo in 1999 and Custom Robo V2 in 2000. Interestingly enough, this was even one of the very few games that came to China's Nintendo 64 counterpart, the IQ Player. Basically, Custom Robo plays in 2 ways. There's an overworld that consists of mostly kids roaming around, which is sort of RPG-ish, or maybe comparable to Pokemon, except whenever you do use the battle system, it takes place around these arena squares, kind of like chessboards in the world, in which case the battles become an isometric view 3D combat fight. The robots here are customizable between things like gun, weapon, bomb weapon, legs for movement, and back pods for crowd control type abilities. The customization system here is actually pretty extensive, and you get all the standard weapons you'd expect, like sniper rifles to stun guns, but it even starts getting really wild and crazy with things like heat-seeking dolphin explosives. All the items even have their own variants too. This seems like a fun series, and I hope Nintendo brings it back someday. Climax Development, under the publisher Crave Entertainment, ported a version of this science fiction tank simulation game Battlezone to the Nintendo 64 as Battlezone Rise of the Black Dogs. Not only was this one a port of the previous PC title, but it also included in it an additional and unique campaign in lieu of the full PC multiplayer experience. Now, I said this one's really more of a futuristic tank simulation game, but it does in fact have tanks called walkers. There's different types of tanks, light ones, bombers, scouts, etc., and of course, the classic armored walking units, which is why I'm talking about them right now. These even have further variants between all the different factions. That would be the Americans, the Soviets, or the Black Dogs, and you can even get out of your tanks and run around on foot in an astronaut suit. One of the more interesting things about this one is how unique or ambitious it was from a gameplay standpoint. You see, this was not just a first-person tank sim type thing, but also a real-time strategy game of sorts where you micromanage resources to plonk down buildings that create units, and then you order everything around strategically. Since this is mainly not about the walking tanks, I almost did put it into the honorable mention section, but I think there is some merit in this strange combination of FPS simulation, RTS strategy, sci-fi moon setting, and of course inclusion of the actual mechs to warrant bringing it up here instead. Rare became a very well-known developer for Nintendo over the years with things like Donkey Kong, 007 GoldenEye, Killer Instinct, and Battletoads, but their first game on the Nintendo 64 was solely about creating as much destruction as possible: Blast Corps. Okay, so maybe the premise isn't that simple. You are a demolition team escorting the way for an uncontrollable nuclear missile carrier. If it bumps into something, a big kaboom will happen, so we're destroying a path for it to drive through. Now that I write that out, I guess it does sound pretty silly. You control a bunch of different vehicles throughout the game as the different levels of destruction turn into puzzles to navigate. There's dump trucks, ram dozers, rocket cars, and so on. You can even get out of the vehicles and walk around on foot in between them, but the real star of the show is a certain skyscraper-sized humanoid robot wrecking ball. We have J-Bomb that uses a jetpack to propel itself up into the air, and then it slams down onto buildings with giant feet, and then Thunderfist, who has basically a giant club for a hand that is for beating down buildings. A much smaller variant of Thunderfist also exists and is playable in the game, which is the Cyclone suit, and it's a little dude that is faster and happily flips around at the sight of destruction. I know sometimes the inclusion of Transformers under the Mecha umbrella gets people a bit prickly, but the franchise is pretty popular and shares a lot of overlap at the very least. There are tons of Transformers fans, maybe not so many fans of Transformers Beast Wars Transmetals. This one was crafted by Locomotive for the N64 and Wave Edge for the PS1 before releasing worldwide during the summer of the 2000s. This is one of those games where the name is shared between console versions, however the games are actually pretty different. And the Nintendo 64 version was actually a Blockbuster exclusive, which likely led to the game landing in less hands overall. Now, Transformers Beast Wars Transmetals is a 2.5D fighter, meaning the camera is in a fixed 2D position, but the actual stage and movement of the characters exists more in a 3D plane. But this becomes problematic when the characters don't actually have the ability to lock onto each other, meaning ranged attacks that end up shooting randomly around the screen, and that combined with the sort of forced transforming mechanic made for low review scores. Interestingly, you can transform between beast, vehicle, or humanoid. Now we'll dig into some games that might have a mech or two, but that's not really the main focus. There's potentially a lot more of these games that I totally missed out on, but I tried to pull together as much as I could. Games that have some sort of mech element, a character, a level, a reference, and so on. We'll run through these a bit quicker, I think. First up's gotta be Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. The Rangers themselves aren't the thing I'm bringing this up for, but the Zords. I'm not sure I've actually ever seen Power Rangers myself, but it's been brought to my attention that these Zords are giant combining fighting machines, and this game has whole levels where you play as them to beat up giant monsters. I don't actually know what the proper name is for the bad guys here. If you do know that one, you can let me know down in the comments. Besides the Zords, first and third person battles, you do pilot various vehicles throughout the game and also run around on foot doing fights. Another shoot 'em up arrives, this time even having a cool mech right on the box art. Unfortunately, you don't get to pilot that one and only fight it while you seem to be stuck in a spaceship the whole time. This is actually a big series of shoot 'em up games, starting back in the 80s and having the most recent in 2006, for various consoles and arcade cabinets over time. Lots of cool laser blasting, but maybe not enough humanoids with beam sabers. In 1997, Konami continued the Ganbare Goemon series onto the N64 with Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. This is a humor series deeply ingrained with Japanese cultural elements. This particular 3D action-adventure stars Goemon as he tries to prevent the mystical world of Peach Mountain from being turned into a Western fine arts theater. Now the reason I'm talking about it here is because of impact. Impact is a giant robot, sometimes sentient and sometimes piloted, who you control through various sequences, though most fun to play is a sort of like FPS boxing shooting minigame against other giant robots. The sequel, Goemon's Great Adventures, main gameplay went a more 2D side-scroller route, but it still did bring back the impact sequences for that FPS pilot punching. I'm not exactly sure if the influence of this was directly from Mecha specifically, or if it was more in line with the closely related genre of live action that's popular, or was popular in Japan, called tokusatsu.
Something's up ahead! Looks different!
All range mode.
Star Fox 64 feels like it deserves to be on this list for a lot of the enemies you fight against, like Agranga's walking mech as the boss on Stage 1, or the Shogun warriors out in space of Sector Y, or even the stone Golem you chase down on Planet Venom. Unfortunately, as far as piloted, Star Fox only gets the R-Wing fighter, the Landmaster tank, or the Blue Marine submarine. If any Star Fox fans out there know if any of the games have, walking playable mechs in them, I would love to know that, because I'm pretty out of the loop when it comes to anything past Star Fox 64. Now let's run through a few more pretty quick, because we might be stretching it too far here. Pilotwing 64 has a few stages where you take to the skies with Gyrocopter to shoot missiles at a giant mechanical version of the Pilot Hawk named Mecha Hawk. Aerofighter's Assault is a combat flight simulation game, but it does include a boss fight that is a giant mechanical crab. Both of the Rampage games about giant monster destruction sometimes have you face off with military mechs as enemies, notably there is one that is based on RoboCop's ED-209. And finally, the end-boss fight sequence of Conker's Bad Fur Day features a parody of Sigourney Weaver's Xenomorph fight at the tail end of the film Alien. Our squirrel dons a power loader suit, which, while is more of an exosuit than a giant robot suit, is something often brought up when talking about mecha in a practical realism setting. A power suit forklift, essentially. And I think that's all we've got for today. Thanks for tuning in.